So for me, the way I look at social well-being is where I look at these two, mythological figures in Icarus and Atlas, right? Atlas, carried the weight of the world on his back, and so that can imagine you could be stressful. And then you got Icarus of like not getting too high and not getting too low. And so for me, I think about the weight that I carry as a black man, as a father, as a husband, as an entrepreneur, as a community leader. It's like, man, this can get really tiring. And so if I try to, I guess, use generally prescribed advice of saying like, all right, so you're going to work 40 to 50 hours a week, and then on the weekends you get this and this. It's like, well, no, that doesn't really work for me. Like for me, it's I don't take any meetings before 10 a.m. I don't take any meetings after 4 p.m. I'm gonna play a video game randomly in the middle of the afternoon. I'm gonna take my son out of school on a random day and say, hey, let's go to the movies. And so I think that by being intentional about the things that you do that give you joy, I think
Thank you for joining us for a new episode of We're Not Okay, a community of healing. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Justin Stewart, and I am joined by my co-host.
Dr. Antia Allen.
And you know how we do. It's nothing new, but we have a new face to show you all for this particular conversation. Today's guest is someone who truly embodies what it means to build with purpose and lead with community. We're joined today by Harold Hughes, who is the founder and CEO of NFNTE Capital, where he helps entrepreneurs tap into one of their greatest resources, their personal networks, to unlock real opportunity. With nearly 2 decades of experience as a serial entrepreneur, Harold has built businesses, secured partnerships, and created spaces where connection comes first. So, kind of like a big deal. Along with all that, he's also the co-founder of the first token gated community for Black founders, funders, and creators, and later would go on to build Catalyst Labs, developing a curriculum that empowers the next generation of innovators. Harold's work reminds us that success is collective, and that when we invest in each other, we all rise. So, with that warm intro, Harold, thank you very much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Glad to be here. Thanks for that amazing intro.
Not a problem, not a problem. We appreciate again the opportunity to learn with you, build with you, to see what we can feed to our audience, but also for myself and Antia. So as we just get kicked off, Harold, when it comes to your work, obviously it's always seemed to center on connection and community. And one of the reasons that we wanted to connect with you with when we're talking about connection, when we're talking about community, we think about the term social well-being. And for those that are unfamiliar with it, would you be able to, with your expertise, tell us what, when you think of social well-being, what does that look like for you? Not just in business, but in everyday life.
Yeah, for me, social well-being really comes down to your standard base state, right? So how are you when things aren't happening, right? I think that a lot of us are very good at articulating how we are when something good is happening. I think we're really good at articulating how we are when something stressful is happening. Probably not as good as we should be, but I think that when it comes down to it, that ability to articulate how you feel at base level on a regular day when there are no deadlines, when there's no, little pockets of joy that you're randomly experiencing, what does that look like for you? And I think that that's something that we've got to be mindful of, maintaining that evenness more often throughout our day to day.
And as you describe that roller coaster of the highs and lows and being able to establish or find that foundational middle ground, for you, when it comes to your experiences, what in your life, whether it's your upbringing, whether it's your day to day now, what are the experiences that have shaped your view when it comes to social well-being?
Well, I think at one point in time I heard this saying that like if you threw up your problems in the air with all the people in the world who threw up their problems, and I'm completely paraphrasing it because I don't remember the exact quote, but if we all threw up our problems in the air and you bent down to pick up yours, it would be gone. Like someone else would have taken your problems. And that is just such a huge reminder to me about the importance of perspective and recognizing that no matter how bad it is, it could be worse. No matter how bad it is, someone else has it worse. And in the entrepreneur and business side of it, like some of the challenges you deal with today are a result of prayers that are being answered that you had a year ago, 5 years ago, right? And so I'm just constantly reminding myself like this could be a lot worse. Like I have it really good. I talk about my privilege all the time. I was fortunate and blessed to grow up in a loving family, a two-parent household. Sometimes we didn't have all the things we needed. Sometimes we didn't have all the things we wanted. But at the end of the day, I recognize like there was a lot of privilege that I had poured into me, and that kind of shapes how I view the world today.
And as you talk about how it shaped you, I think all of us can agree, those talking and then those listening, of, sometimes it's some of us don't always have quote unquote the best experiences or the best upbringing. Some of us have a great upbringing, but I think regardless of what you've been given, it's kind of what you choose to do with what you've been given and kind of how do you choose to move forward in that path. Some go one way, some go the other way. I won't
Right.
designate which way is best, but we all have choices. We all make decisions.
For sure.
Some of us have more resources than others, but it's just how do we choose to move forward? So thanks for giving your input with that. But as we dig deeper into your role as a Black founder and a community builder,
Hmm.
when we go back to social well-being, since you've gone into like the personal aspects of how it shaped you, now with it wearing those multiple hats, which we'll go through more of it with the conversation, how has that perspective of yours evolved?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately I've been really fortunate to have had a lot of unique experiences. And so, having gone to a predominantly white institution for college, but still finding my community there, I joined a fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha, but then did student government. And then after work, or after college, I joined the workforce. I went to corporate America, but it wasn't my first job because I worked to put myself through college. I worked at Radio Shack, and before that, I worked in retail and shoes, and I worked at fast food. And so I've had these unique experiences so that when I had the opportunity to build a community, there wasn't a type of Black founder. There wasn't a type of Black person that I was expecting when someone walked through the door. And I was genuinely curious and inquisitive about, oh, well, tell me, what got you to this door at this point? What got you to this point in life? And I'm constantly thinking about all the things that have to happen to bring us to a certain point where you meet a person. It's like, man, there's so much you don't know about them. And so ultimately being able to connect with founders, connect with entrepreneurs, connect with builders, and be curious about their journey to get there has been really impactful for me. When I was running Bandwagon, my tech company, I used to talk about how the CEO's job and most important thing, number one, is to not run out of money. But number two is to set the vision and destination of the company. So it's like, okay, cool. I want to accomplish this, meaning I want everyone to be at this restaurant at 2 p.m. for lunch, like if we're using it as a metaphor. I'm not telling you how to get there. I just said we need to be at this destination at 2 p.m. And that's how you're setting goals, saying, hey, y'all, this is our goals for the quarter. So you set the timeline, and this is the number. This is where we're trying to accomplish. But my CTO may say, I'm going to take a jet ski to the restaurant by 2 p.m. My head of product may decide to ride a bike. My marketing person may decide to take a helicopter. And what ends up happening there is that when each person gets to the destination that the CEO has set, they may add a perspective, say, I saw this thing on my ride over here on a bike, and I was wondering maybe we could use that in our product. Or I was taking a jet ski and it gave me this perspective of this. And so when you invite people from diverse backgrounds or invite people who have different types of thoughts, it actually encourages a set of diversity when it comes to the experience they can bring to the product, to the company. And so for me, that's always been really, really, really powerful on how we've seen perspective be built within our community and within the organizations I've been working on.
Thank you for that. And I have to rewind back to when you said Radio Shack. I was like, why is he aging me and him by
Listen,
saying Radio Shack?
this gray is not, this ain't no just for men or whatever it is. This is earned.
Shout
Nothing
out
given.
Radio Shack, shout out Circuit City.
Shout out Radio Shack.
Oh,
Listen, I'll give you another
ooh.
one. Like when I went into corporate America, I tell people all the time, the way I like to describe it is I spent the first decade of my life in work learning the game,
Mhm.
playing in corporate America and like figuring out like how business is done. Then I spent the next decade of my life playing the game as a venture-backed entrepreneur, started my own company, hired people, had to fire people, had to go and create something from scratch. And now I'm in this new chapter where I get to help teach people the game and help them learn about the rules that are unwritten. And when I talk about my corporate America journey, my first, aside from working at Radio Shack to put myself through college, when I got to corporate America, my biggest clients were Facebook, which is, we still know Facebook, but Kodak, Blockbuster, right? And so, for context, those invoices were millions of dollars. And in the course of it, those companies went bankrupt and shut down while the POs were being processed. So, like, I'm watching the news, seeing what's happening, but the POs are still coming over. And I'm like, well, if we can still ship this, please pay me my commission. So, yeah, definitely have had some times dating myself there.
I said us both because I knew it. I was like, I know every company he's listed right now. I
Right. There you go. Right.
Blockbuster.
Right.
Spent hours in there trying to find one movie I didn't like.
Exactly.
So going back to this idea of being a founder, working with other founders, um, we want to talk about Infinite Capital, your company. Part of your mission, you have a amazing mission. Like I'm like, how do I join? Sign me up. Like it's one of those
Right.
types of missions. But I pulled out one piece that stood out to me, which was move beyond transactional relationships into community sustained relationships. Um, and so it seems a lot of your focus, and even from what you shared already, focuses on social capital. So, what does it mean to kind of reframe the idea from money as power to relationships as power through your organization of Infinite Group? And of course, tell us a little bit more about what that is and what you all do.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I had, the unfortunate task of having to shut my company down last year. So I raised millions of dollars, worked with these amazing clients, generated millions of dollars of revenue, but we still had to shut it down. Like sometimes that's how it goes. Oftentimes that's how it goes. And I wanted to figure out like what I do next. And so I really was digging deep and said like, okay, what are the things that I'm good at? And I found that in all of the successes that we had as a company, they all came down to people. And like I was very fortunate. I tell people all the time, or people will tell me, Harold, you're really good at sales. And I am good at sales, but I'm better at relationship management. Like I'm better at connecting with people who genuinely want to see me win or genuinely want to collaborate with me. And so it doesn't necessarily feel like sales because we've already identified this is my character, this is my interest, these are my goals. And if any of that aligns, maybe it'll cross paths where we can work together. And that's how it's worked for me for decades. And so when it came to building Infinite, the idea was, man, everyone's so focused on venture capital. They're focused on, how much money goes to Black founders, how much money goes to women, how much money goes to the Southeast or the Midwest. And so I said, we're really overlooking an infinite resource, which is social capital, which with each person that you meet, your network can grow compounding at a significantly faster rate than if I gave you $10,000. I have this crazy idea, which I still need to see if I'm going to do it, but I'll tell y'all. So I thought to myself, it'd be so interesting if I could like give someone $100,000 as an investment and say, you can have $100,000. You can't tell anyone that I gave it to you. I don't want to be listed anywhere. You cannot reference me. You've got to take this money and go. And then another person, not give them $100,000 and say, I am an open book to you. Anyone that I know, you can know. I will sit on the calls with you. I will lend my time and talents, all of these things, and see which performs better. I believe that the person who is genuinely curating relationships is going to go further because of that multiplier that happens. And so when I talk about moving from transaction to community sustained, it's really this thing about, man, everyone goes into these relationships and conversations and thinks, man, this person can really help me if they did this for me, or how can I get this out of them? And I think we should go in and say, how do I help this person? Or, oh, you know what? You should meet my friend so and so, or have you read this book, or have that. And so that's where I think about the importance of moving from transaction to thinking through how do we connect and create value for the entire ecosystem. So ultimately, there's a lot of folks who will say, I want to create this much, actually, I want to create this much value, and I want to extract this much value, right around there. I'm saying I want to create this much value and I can extract any amount, right? I don't have to take out as much as I'm putting in. And so when it comes down to community sustained relationships, I think that's where you're saying, oh, you should know this person, and we're all building together, and there's opportunity for us to generate more and therefore each have more.
It reminds me of the idea of mentoring versus sponsorship.
Mm,
You know how
right.
people say, "Oh, you're a mentor, you're a guide, you're advising someone," but a sponsor is like,
Standing in
Harold,
me. Right.
you need to meet Harold. He has this company, blah blah blah. You need to,
Yep.
like that kind. It's like anytime somebody or they mention an opportunity, and you know who this would be good for, like someone who
Exactly.
is really creating those connections. So that idea of social capital really for me connects heavily to that idea of sponsorship.
Yeah.
um and I don't know if you've noticed this, but I find that people actually get really surprised because I'm one of those people where, and it's probably because I have ADHD, but like I'll see I'll see an opportunity and I'll go, oh my gosh, you know who this would be great for, and I'll email them or I text them or
Constantly.
and they're like, oh my gosh, thank you for thinking of me. And I'm just like, why is this not normal? Why is this not common? Why aren't more people making these sorts of connections, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if it's a thing that is like inherent, right? I think it's something we can learn. I think that it's a level of thoughtfulness. I think it's a level of committing that mental power, that brain power to community and to others. And I just unfortunately think that a lot of times so many of us are overworked, underpaid, stressed out, multitasking that we may not have the ability or capacity to in that moment. But I think as long as we continue to try and work towards it, I think that's amazing. And for those of us that do have it, let's lean into doing it more.
Yes. So another piece that I want to kind of rewind back to is social well-being.
Mhm.
So, do you see any parallels between what you described or defined as social well-being and what you just shared about social capital?
Yes, to an extent. I mean, so for me, the way I look at social well-being is where I look at these two, mythological figures in Icarus and Atlas, right? Atlas, carried the weight of the world on his back, and so that can imagine you could be stressful. And then you've got Icarus of like not getting too high and not getting too low. And so for me, I think about the weight that I carry as a black man, as a father, as a husband, as an entrepreneur, as a community leader. It's like, man, this can get really tiring. And so if I try to, I guess, use generally prescribed advice of saying like, all right, so you're going to work 40 to 50 hours a week, and then on the weekends you get this and this. It's like, well, no, that doesn't really work for me. Like for me, it's I don't take any meetings before 10 a.m. I don't take any meetings after 4 p.m. I'm gonna play a video game randomly in the middle of the afternoon. I'm gonna take my son out of school on a random day and say, hey, let's go to the movies. And so I think that by being intentional about the things that you do that give you joy, I think scheduling that joy and taking every opportunity for it is huge so that you don't have to have this burnout moment and then have to go into this deep reset. Like I don't have the time to be burnt out. Like I just simply don't have it. And so I need to do a better job and the best job of regulating myself up and down every day. And so that matters to me. And so when you talk about self-care, and I tell people all the time, like, fellas, go get that massage, go get that facial, like play that video game, go out with the guys. Like that is really important to me. And so when it comes down to the social capital piece, thinking through how we can do that together in some cases, sometimes people want downtime, but I think that checking in on people is huge. I was just speaking with some folks the other day, and they were saying like, "Well, how do you do? What's a tip that you would give to like being better in social capital?" And I said, when you think of someone, text them. When you think of someone, call them. Like when you read something that reminds you of something, send this to them because they're thinking of you too. They just didn't think to. They didn't take the next action. People love to be reached out to and checked on. Hey, are you good? Like and it doesn't take a lot, especially when we're moving into this like hyper data technology age. Like the humanness is going to be the biggest deciding factor. And so I just try and encourage people to be mindful of how that not only helps regulate yourself, but also how that helps sustain and check on the rest of the community.
Mhm. Made me oddly think about what you were just saying of when you reach out to people and then sometimes of, oh, I was just thinking about you. I was just about to call you. More often than not, they
Yeah.
weren't. But to what you said, people do like to hear from others, and the thought of, oh, I was thinking of you, it just, I don't know, it sparks something of the collective. So I'm glad that you called that out. Um, as we've been talking, I think this particular statement exemplifies what we think of through this brief conversation from what we've picked up from what you've been giving us, Harold. And it's, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I
Mm.
believe that proverb, and to what your mantra has been to this stage when it comes to community, that's your MO, that's your mantra, that's your path forward. You understand that there's times where people do need alone time or time to decompress, or what may have you. But
Right.
collectively speaking, if we want to move farther, we have to do it united or joined hands.
Yep.
So as we unpack that a little bit more, Harold, I was trying to get more of your perspective when it comes to the importance of building relationships when it comes to collective healing. And I'm looking specifically for, we'll say, underrepresented or under-resourced communities. What's the power of building these relationships for these types of communities?
So when you talk about under-resourced communities, there's inherently a lack of access to information, right? And information is normally born out of experiences. I was just saying on LinkedIn the other day that the reason we need more stories from Black founders, and specifically non-white men, is because history is normally told from the vantage point of the winner. But there are a lot of losers who did the exact same things that the winners did. They just didn't have the same fortune or privilege or timing or luck or whatever you want to call it. And so we need to, in our communities, be very intentional about what resources we're using and what information we're reading and capturing and how we share that with the next generation. And so when you think about under-resourced communities and how important it is for us to stay together, it's that it's going to help us avoid costly mistakes. It's going to help us move much faster. It's going to help us know, hey, we probably shouldn't partner with her or partner with him because of how they move and how they work, right? And so there's that next level of information that isn't found in books, like going back to the folklore era of like, yeah, a lot of information is passed the word of mouth. Like I'm going to be hosting a dinner series tonight. I'll be in DC, and the next one will be in Miami, where I know that the things that are said at that dinner table, we're not recording it and having it broadcasted. Like being in the room matters. And so encouraging entrepreneurs who are building to not do this build in stealth thing or building alone, I think adds immense value because of the amount of information you may not even know that you're missing out on simply building in isolation.
And from that is just the idea of partnerships, the power of partnership, the power of collaboration, the power again of moving forward together. Um, when you think of, or as a investor yourself, as a person that funds, as a person that is a may provide partnerships, can you kind of pull a little bit more of the strand of looking at investments as a business opportunity versus looking at investments as an act of care?
I mean, it's absolutely a business opportunity. Like, listen, I tell people all the time that we've got to get to, and when I say we, I'm talking about Black people. I'm normally mostly always talking to and for Black people. We have to get comfortable with making money. Like we have to lean into, we need money, we need to focus on capital. And oftentimes you'll hear people who will say, like, yeah, we've got to do like our business. I've got a business and it does X, like it does X really, really well. And we donate 10% of our profits to Y. That's this cause in our community. And it's just like, no, build a business that is sustainable, that allows you to have profits, that allows you to hire people at a livable wage, that gives them time off so they can do the things they care about. I think that one of the things that helped contribute to breaking society was the Silicon Valley culture of like, you're going to be here for 16 hours a day, 18 hours a day. So we're going to have foosball tables and video game sets and arcades and restaurants and all this other stuff. So now you've got this mindset of people thinking that work must also fulfill me in these ways and these causes and all these other things, to which I'm saying, let's focus on the dollars. And if I have enough capital as an individual, then I can donate to whatever cause that I want to. But being able to talk about business as an investment vehicle to where it can create economic returns is huge to me. Versus saying like, oh, I'm supporting this business because it's led by a Black founder, for example. I always say, okay, cool. what happens when there's another Black founder doing the same business, right? There's three companies in the Southeast that are all like Black founder led doing X, literally direct competitors. I'm like, how do y'all pick? Like, how are you deciding to go? Like, you've got to have other value propositions. And so for me, I want to encourage those folks to say, yeah, we also do these amazing, incredible things, and the culture is beyond just delivering for that community. So for me, investing is how do I get the dollars so that we can then fund the causes that we care about? But you don't have to have them so intertwined that your business is now tied to a cause that doesn't allow you to pivot to sustain the business itself.
And when you talk about mindsets, it harkens back to a conversation that we had with your brother, Stephen Hughes, when we were talking about financial well-being, which everyone will hear sooner than later. But when it comes to that mindset, I guess I think back to my upbringing of, even when you barely have enough, you still give it to another person.
Mhm.
And sometimes that person that may give their last drop finds themselves in a precarious situation or a situation where, they're kind of scraping along versus someone that doesn't necessarily hoard, but it's like, okay, I need to make sure that I'm taking care of myself and making sure that I'm keeping myself afloat before, providing or advocating or supporting others. When we're looking at our community, is that something when it comes to that particular mindset, do you think that that's an inherent thing, or do you believe that may come from somewhere else? Because as you did state, like you build a business, it's like, oh, I want to give this, give this. It's like, no, focus on building the business because we do see, unfortunately, that a lot of the businesses that are built aren't able to stay afloat. And I'm not sure if that's the reason, but we do see that, these businesses may close after like 3 years, five
Yeah.
years, 6 years. So do you think that mindset at all factors or maybe something completely different?
So I think it's two things. So to the business closings, I think that most of that is normally due to not properly deciding and figuring out if the market wants your product and service, right? And so I think that that's probably a bigger reason why businesses close. With the accelerator that we run, we talk about how 42% of businesses shut down, citing no market need. Like flat out, the market just didn't really want this. So I think that's generally across the board, regardless of the community. That said, I'm the type of person that when I'm low, I try to give my last thing, right? I remember I was in Austin, Texas, and we had this crazy snowstorm. Well, everyone heard about it across Texas. A lot of people lost power, a lot of people lost water, many people lost their lives. And I was like in the thick of it, trying to help raise money, and we raised thousands and thousands of dollars. And some people were finding out that just that same week that my dad had passed. And they're like, Harold, your dad passed away. Why are you doing this? You should be doing something else. I'm like, there's literally nothing else for me to do. Like right now, the only thing I can do is help other people. And so I'm the type of person that when I'm feeling low, I like to pour into other people because I get recharged from helping people and giving to people. Again, because of perspective that no matter how bad it is, it could be worse. And I want to make sure I'm helping that person not experience worse. But when it comes to the business side of it, I don't run my business that way. Like I do run my business to make sure we're doing really, really an important job of saying, who is our customer? What is it that they look to our product or service for? How much are they willing to pay for it? How much does it cost us to produce it? How many of those customers exist? And by being able to do that, I've been so fortunate and blessed to, I haven't had a W-2 in, gosh, it'll be 11 years now. It's been a long time. So being able to separate those two, I think, is important, especially for entrepreneurs, not only for the sake of the business and your employees, but for your own sanity.
Speaking of these founders and their businesses, I wanted to talk a little bit about the challenges that we find that Black founders um, tend to have. And one thing when it comes to building social capital. So, some research I found when I was preparing for this interview with you is from Lashana R. Harris, she wrote something called We Are Each Other's Business, Black Entrepreneurship, Trust, and the Mobilization of Social Capital.
Amazing.
And in this research, it pretty much states, and I'm definitely gonna paraphrase, um, that minority entrepreneurs actually have less developed social capital than their white counterparts leading to challenges with successful development and growth.
I mean, okay,
And
interesting. I could see a way for that, depending on how it's defined.
so I would like to know your thoughts on it as far as Black and Brown founders and when it comes to trying to build or develop that social capital, any challenges that they might have, or maybe reasons for those challenges.
Yeah, I mean, my speculation without reading it, which I do need to see that, so please send it over. I'd love to read it.
Will do.
Is that a lot of our social capital comes from our collegiate and professional networks, and so if we're looking at the percentage of us in business that did go to school and then did go on to these other businesses, and say, okay, cool. If less of us are going to college than whoever this control demographic is, for the sake of that statement, then it's like, oh, okay, well, then you probably knew less people. Fine, sure. Regardless, I'm more focused on the fact that all of this is something that is teachable. Like you can cure that ailment. When it comes down to building social capital and relationships with one another, it really starts with, I believe, mastery. And people don't necessarily see how those dots are normally connected. So I'll take a second to explain that, or at least my perspective. That in each of our families, there's a thing that one person is like the best at, right? So if in my family it's like, oh, okay, we need someone to cook the food, it's my older brother Andre. He's the chef. Now, I also have a youngest brother who is a sushi chef, but we expect Andre to do the cooking. So if we need a recipe, we're calling Andre, right? So me and my four siblings, so the five of us, the Furious Five, we have our video chats. We're on the phone several times a day, like literally just propping it up while we're working. And if I'm like, hey, I want to make this, how do I make this? I'm gonna call Andre, and he's known in our family as the best cook. Then, if you're Andre, what is the next step? The next step is, how are you the best in your friend circle? So you've got your household. Now you're the best in your friend circle at that particular thing. Then in beyond the friend circle, it's like your acquaintances. Like, oh, I know a guy who's a really good cook. He runs a catering company. His name's Andre. Okay, great. And then as you continue to expand, or can you be the best in your neighborhood? Can you be the best in your zip code? And ultimately, as you develop that level of mastery, especially today, where there's so many people who have been isolated, where they're going to ask ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever and say, hey, I need X. Who's the best person, or where do I get it? Being known is so valuable. And so by developing that relationship with others and being like, hey, this is a service that I do, this is a talent that I have, this is a skill that I possess, you're going to start to see that, oh, people are knowing you for this thing. And that's what's going to make your phone ring. And so I think that is what is an opportunity in our communities, that if we are not really focused on mastery of a specific skill set, that we can be known as the best in our household, and then friend group, and then acquaintances, and then neighborhood, and then zip code. It's hard for us to be able to differentiate our talents and then monetize it in a way that people are going to want to connect and collaborate with us, right? And so the social capital piece of it is in the same way of, when I started my business, I guess it was 2014, I was like, oh, I'm gonna put this on Facebook and say, hey, y'all, I'm doing this thing. Primarily because it's like when you say you're going on a diet, someone will see you 2 weeks later and see you eating a hamburger and say, well, what happened to that old diet that you were working on? With me telling people I was working on a startup, I figured when people saw me, they'd say, hey, how's that, little company you're building? And that would be like a set of external check-ins. But then something else happened. That I wasn't expecting. I would wake up to these emails or these texts from people were saying, hey, did you see that Ticketmaster is doing this? Hey, did you see that StubHub is doing this? And I was confused at first, but then I realized my really smart friends heard that I said I was working on this specific problem in this specific area, and they've now connected me with the problem so well that they're using their spare mental capacity to try to figure out ways to help me because I've identified the piece of land, that parcel that's mine. So if you're able to do that with your skill set, people will say, "Oh, let me reach out to Justin. Let me reach out to Andre," and like be able to say, "This is how I can support them. This is how I can connect them to opportunities." And so I think that's where social capital can begin. It doesn't mean you have to go out and start meeting a bunch of people. Hone in on your craft. Be very intentional about it, and tell a few people, "This is what I do really, really well." And that is where I think the beginning can happen.
And I think that's a great advice for many of us. I think even those who aren't necessarily trying to start a business or anything like that, just keeping that in mind. And I'm sure I'm not known as the best cook in my friend group, by the way, but yeah. You mentioned Chat GPT in your discussion of the challenges and how we develop capital and really more in the mastery of a skill. Um, Something I noticed on your website for Infinite was an AI readiness program,
Hmm.
which I think is really exciting, especially because we don't need to just be focused on the now, we need to be focused on the future. I'm in higher ed and I'm in faculty development. And so one of
Yeah.
my jobs is to make sure they are up to date on everything that's happening.
Right.
And I have such a struggle because they're like, AI is going to take my job, or these students just want to use it to cheat. And
Yeah.
and we have some, I'm not saying they're all this way, but and some of them are trying to figure out how to embrace it, how to use it to make things maybe easier for them, more efficient. And so I always find myself kind of like trying to serve the people who really want to embrace it and trying to ease in the people who are so anti and so fearful. And so I'd like to know, how do you bring in that AI readiness to your work? Is it with founders? Is it with young people? Just sharing a little bit more.
Yeah, so the AI readiness course was actually taught to rising eighth graders. So, a couple of years ago, I decided I wanted my son, who at the time was 6, now he's 9. I wanted to make sure he knew what dad does for work. At the time, we were using blockchain technology to solve ticket fraud and being able to have a transparent database on like this assets, all this other stuff. And so I ended up writing a kid's book about blockchain, literally called A Kid's Book About Blockchain, primarily so that my 6-year-old would be able to tell his friends in class, like what dad does for work. And so as I wrote it, I had more people thinking like, wow, this is really explained so well that even I get it, like adults. And so I started to say, yeah, I'm trying to educate people from 6 to 60. So my son to my mom, right? My son's age to my mom's age. And so in doing that, I was like, man, I'm really good at taking complex topics and subjects and distilling them down. And so I was working with one of my clients, my largest customer is University of Texas, and we were trying to gear up for programming for the fall. And they said, hey, actually, we've got a group of students. Would you want to be able to do a program over the summer? I said, yeah, actually, I've been working on this AI readiness course. I've spoken at South by Southwest EDU the past couple of years about the importance of artificial intelligence in education and how educators, it's their job and our role to make sure that we're supporting students' learning habits and interests by being prepared ourselves. And so I said, yeah, let's do this. And so we put together this AI readiness course for these rising eighth graders, mostly who don't use AI, never really used it. And so, number one, we said, what is AI? Let's cover what it is. Number two, what are some of the platforms and what can you do on those platforms? Number three, now that you've seen what you can do, let's talk about what you should do. Let's talk about AI ethics, right? So, to your point, people are like, oh, it's for cheating. It's like, well, people have been cheating since the beginning of time, right? So, that's not new. It's like, okay. At the same time, the AI is going to take my job. It's like, well, there's some jobs that AI is absolutely going to take quicker than others. But at the same time, for those of us that have other jobs, it's not AI is going to take a job. It's going to be people who've gotten good at AI, implementing it as a tool who are going to be able to take your job. And so, how do we prepare you and future proof you? And so, putting our programming and curriculum together was really about making sure that humans understood that, yes, I respect higher education. I think it is important. My wife has several degrees, bachelor's from Howard, master's from Clemson, my alma mater, and then her doctorate from University of Texas. So we support higher education in our house. At the same time, I recognize that it's not able to move at the speed that the market needs it to. And so with Infinite, us developing this alternative and complementary education services company, the goal is to be able to take builders and entrepreneurs and technologists who have unique skill sets because they've been in the marketplace. And how do we take that and distill it down, not only to young people, but to anyone who's interested in learning so that they can learn to complement the higher education programs that exist out there. And so that's really our approach. And so started with K through 12. We work in the collegiate system as well, but also definitely support corporate professionals and adults who are interested in thinking through how does this impact me and how can I benefit from it?
And I'm glad you mentioned that about higher ed. So I just joined this group called the Alliance of Future Makers, which is led by Dr. Monique Reeves, who is an amazing human being. I only met her virtually, and I'm like, oh my gosh, who I never, how do I not know this person already? And one thing that she said was similar to what you stated. She was talking about higher ed, and she said, if 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 our internal pace does not match the external pace, then we are basically moving towards a slow death. And
Period.
people in higher ed don't want to hear that, but I mean, it's the truth. If we are just like, okay, well, they can keep doing that out there, but we're going to keep resisting, and
Yeah,
let's go through all these approvals before we can even say that this can happen.
right.
And meanwhile, she did point to organizations like yours who
Hmm.
they're already doing the work, they're already preparing
Already.
people,
Yep.
and this is where we need to be. So
Yep.
I thank you for the work that you are doing.
Thank you. You know, it's definitely there, but I think when you turn it back to our community, we were having a conversation last weekend, and there's something called Alpha School, and Alpha School is an AI like K through 12 program. It's $45,000 a year though, and so it's like okay, if you don't have $45,000 a year, like you're left out of that. And then if you do $45,000 a year and you're paying for it, like how diverse are your experiences that you're creating for your child? Like how many unique relationships are they experiencing during the course of interacting with their classmates to build on their social capital? So there's a lot of ways that we can work together to complement for sure.
When it comes to working together again, the collective, making sure that you maintain the collective. As we mentioned at the top, Harold, you were one of many titles, and we have some more that were named throughout the conversation: investor, entrepreneur, brother, son, founder, author. But two things that I think that are very, very important and very, very pivotal for you is also the role of husband and the role of father. I know that you've mentioned your son throughout this conversation, and Tia and I also were able to stumble upon an article that spoke about you and your son back in, I think it was 2020, and was talking about during the time of COVID and how you continuously try to find a way to pour into him, even as you've talked today about the book and being able to have your son say, "Hey, this is what my dad does," and articulate in a way where all the kids are like, "Oh yeah, that's cool," versus like, "Oh, that's cool, your dad does that."
Right.
So when we think about that for you, and then we think about that for people in that situation, but a similar role, when we think about maintaining community, but at home, how do you, Harold, find that balance between nourishing the community, but then also making sure that you pour and nourish your household?
For sure. So yes, I've talked a good bit about my son. That just happens to be because he's older. But I do also have my daughter. She is 4. So I have two little Leos, both little August babies. And I remember we had our son. We didn't find out the gender of either of them. Like we just knew we were pregnant and having babies. And our friends hated it. And they were like, "Well, if you don't find out, like, what are we supposed to get?" And we're like, "Wipes, diapers. We don't need pink elephants or blue dogs. We don't need any of that stuff. It's just whatever." So, first kid's there and, get him. And he's like, "Oh, it's a boy." And the second one, and we had our two names picked out. And, next one, baby girl, we have her. And it's like, "Oh, it's a girl." And I remember having my son and being like, "Oh my gosh, he looks just like me. And this is like my little twin." And so for, 5 years, it was just me, him, and my wife. And then my daughter comes around, you see her personality and all those other things. I was like, "Oh, this is it. This is what it looks like. Like this is my person. This is my little boo." And so it's important for me, I think, to make sure that they know that they're my reason, right? Like I think that oftentimes people are doing all these different things. Like, yes, I'm traveling for work right now, and there's a burden that comes with the provider role that doesn't get talked about a lot in from men oftentimes because I think that it's like, oh yeah, you're supposed to work, and that means sometimes you got to travel, and that means sometimes you're gonna miss the Halloween party or whatever those things are, and that sucks. And so being able to say like, okay, how can I make this work? So like literally, real life example, I was speaking on Saturday at the Black Boy Joy Summit in Boston. So a few days ago, had this planned, and I always like to take my son on one of my talks, like with me. Last year we went to Richmond, Virginia, to the Black Street Conference. The year before we went to Chicago for one of these other events. So this year, Black Boy Joy Summit. Obviously, take my 9-year-old son. It seems like a perfect thing to take him to. At the same time, I was born in New York. I love New York. New York's my favorite city in the world, and he had never been. And so I was like, I wonder if I could like move things around where we could stop in New York and then maybe take the train to Boston and like do all this stuff. And so my sister, and while I'm thinking all of this, my sister sends me a TikTok of some dad waking up his son in the middle of the night saying like, "Hey, buddy, do you want to skip school and go to a Yankees game?" And the kid's like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Do you want to skip school and we're gonna fly to New York and go to a Yankees game?" And they did it. And I was like, you know what? Let's do this. Like, let's create this moment. And so I literally posted on my Instagram and on social, like, I'm going to surprise him with this flight. We're going to go to New York on Thursday. He loves like theater and Broadway and Hamilton. So I was like, we're going to go to Broadway on Thursday night. Then on Friday, we're going to go see the Knicks play at Madison Square Garden. Then we're going to take a train to Boston so I can do my talk, the work that I have to do. Then I'm going to fly him home on Sunday, play Gabby's Dollhouse with my daughter, have dinner with my wife and the kids, and then Monday, fly to DC. Like literally, that was my last like 4 or 5 days. And so reminding them that they are the reason has been so important to me. And then also like making sure that my wife knows, like, hey, like aside from me making sure I've got us financially, that like, hey, what do you need? Like, hey, so if I'm traveling, it's like I'm gonna fly my mother-in-law up here. So it's not just you here. Or my sister is actually going to be pulling up at the house in a couple hours and they're going to kick it. So making sure my community's got me and supports me is one of the things that allows me to go so hard when I'm working with other people, knowing that home is taken care of. That refuels me and knows like, all right, I'm good. It's always video calls, it's always chats. I check in all the time. But if I can create unique moments and experiences like I did this past weekend, that is what makes it all worth it. And I encourage people to try and figure out like what is their reason. So even tonight, that's going to be one of the things that we talk about to kick off dinner is I don't need you to tell me what you do or who you do it for. I just want to know what your reason is. Like, why are you doing any of this? And they're my reason. And so being able to have that North Star and an anchor has really allowed me to go full charge into the stuff that we're doing.
Haven't said this in a long time, but that was beautifully stated. And
Appreciate that.
I don't know, I guess you think about just upbringing in the old way when we had the dad that was out who God knows how who long working and you just came home at the end of the day and kind of you see that like splinter, you see that fracture within the family dynamic, but it's always like I'm doing this for you all. But I think sometimes the kids or even their spouse may still feel like, are we an afterthought to the actual work that you're doing? So to what you've beautifully stated again of just making sure that you're very intentional of having your reason, having your why for you. Who you go back home to, that is your why, and you want to make sure that regardless of what I'm doing, whatever I'm putting out into the universe, I'm putting you are the universe first, and then
Right.
I'm pouring it out accordingly. So thank you again for sharing that.
Well, yeah, I mean, my dad was like that. My dad was an electrician. And so I think we grew up in an era where your parents went to work. But now my kids are like, see me in the house. And so my son's like, hey, dad, can we play some Fortnite? And it's like, I'm on work calls. Like, I know you see me, which means you think I'm available, but I am not. I'm literally invisible right now. I have to work. And so there's that piece of it. But the other part I do think is, I think in that same article that you talked about, I talked about the fact that especially black men, and we talk about mental health and talk about therapy, a lot of us are so caught up in like, oh, we're going to pass on these LLCs and these businesses to our kids. We're not aware of the trauma we're passing on. And so I remember seeing a clip of one of the Maoris, I do not know which one, but she was on the talk show crying about how she's missing these events with her kids and how like awful it was and how mommy wants to be there and this and this. I'm just like, so many dads feel that exact same way, but we can't like cry about it. There's a societal pressure that's expected for us to be like, yeah, dad's not gonna be able to make it for this. Dad doesn't know who the pediatrician is. Dad doesn't know his, the kid's best friends. And there's all these different videos and tropes for years of like the aloof father, which has been like the most damning thing to me for decades. And so I've always hated that. And so the idea for me is like, nah, I'm gonna make sure we're gonna show up. We're gonna make sure we're connected. We're gonna know the information, and so yeah, that's a reason for me to make sure I'm constantly connected and plugged in.
Always great to hear. Always great to hear. As we begin to unfortunately wind down, Harold, for those that are checking for you, for those that want to learn more, you mentioned the Black Boy Joy Conference. You mentioned you'll be speaking later today. When this is
Yeah.
released, don't know, so you won't be speaking by the
Who
time people hear
knows?
it, but you're working now. For those that are like trying to learn more about your space, are there any other projects that you'd like to call out or events that, people can be checking for you or looking forward to?
I'm doing my best to try to exist more online, not only because I think that my story is one that isn't told often. Like, you have a bunch of success, and then you fail, you deal with depression and, shame and guilt and all this other stuff, and then you're trying to figure out ways to help and support. Like, I want people to understand that I'm around character. So if you're following me on social, you're going to see, me cooking and being a dad, or you're going to see me talking about companies that I'm investing in or meeting, or you're going to see me doing whatever the things are. And so I think that whether it's my presence online, that's going to show around character, but also from a programming standpoint, we want to continue to work with institutions that are thinking through how do we complement our current curriculum that can support the goals of our students. And so being able to do the work we do at Infinite has been really, really powerful. And so just want to continue to do that. We're working with some really, really cool organizations to kick off the top of 2026. So I'm excited to share more about that. But no, in the meantime, all my socials, which I'm sure y'all will include in some show notes, is probably the best way to stay connected with me and learn about how we can collaborate.
Of course, of course. So now that we've gone through the penultimate, we always like to leave you the way that we met you. So now we have the surprise question. This is where everything goes off the rails. Everything that we've built to this point just thrown in the trash.
All right.
But Harold, we've seen how much you've poured into others, how much you've poured into the community, how much you've poured into your family community. But the ultimate question for us to you is when it comes to you, when it comes to those quiet moments, what are those moments that bring you the most joy?
Hmm. I mean, I think for me, the thing that brings me the most joy is showing up for people and them knowing that I'm there. I've always said, I was in Toastmasters. I had a crazy Jamaican accent when I was in elementary school 'cause my mom sent me to Jamaica for school because South Carolina didn't start when they were supposed to start. Anyways, long story, but I had this really, really strong Jamaican accent. So I went to a speech pathologist. I've always cared much, about communicating at a high rate because understanding is so important to me. And so one of my Toastmasters talks was called obituary building, where I said, if we took the same level of time and attention and care in building our obituaries as we do our resumes, we'd be better people. And this is 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago now. And so the idea here is that I've always wanted, no matter what, at the end of the day, I told my wife, I told my friends, whoever's left there to make the decisions, that above all, you can put whatever you want on my tombstone, but I want it to say he was a good friend. And so for me, the joy that I experience and get from being in the same city and grabbing a bite with a friend, or getting a random phone call and someone saying, "Hey, I'm walking in the grocery store. I want to catch up with you." I think that is probably the thing that brings me the most joy, is that a person knowing, like, of the billions of people in this world, someone thought of you to check on you, to say hi, to send you a note, to do whatever. So that is probably the thing that makes me the most happy and gives me the most warm and fuzzies.
Thank you very much for sharing that. But again, it was a great conversation. As we said at the beginning, what we knew was going to be what we unpacked. Great beginning, greater ending. So we appreciate the time that you gave to us. We appreciate the time and the expertise and the learning opportunities that you provided also for our listening audience. And we don't do like a shot o'clock, but because you shouted out New York for Antia and then
Yes.
Boston visiting, but you went there, so it's good. Since I'm from Boston, we appreciate that from both of our ends. So not a shot o'clock,
Indeed,
but at least a shout out o'clock.
indeed, indeed.
So, again, for our listeners, thank you again for joining us. We had the esteemed pleasure of having Harold Hughes, the founder of Infinite. And thanks again for joining us. It was a pleasure.
Much appreciated. Thank y'all.
Thank you.